Today in Raising Innovators, we're going to talk about how to foster entrepreneurial skills in your young innovator. And I have a very special guest, very good friend, one of my best friends and mentor in the whole world. And that is John the Armas. And let me tell you a little bit about him before. He has not only been a disruptor in different industries, he's also been the CEO, C-level executives of companies like DirecTV and Sumitomo Corporation, Home Shopping Network. We have a wealth of knowledge today here in this episode. So stay tuned and let me now introduce you to our dear John the Armas.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Doing fantastic.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun.
I think so.
Okay, so today I want you to tell me a little bit, what was your first entrepreneurial project? How did you get started? Let's go back to your childhood.
Wow, that's going a long time. I was thinking about it a little bit this morning, and I thought about my dad, my dad and my mom have always been my mentors and my guides. And I remember early on him telling me a story about his first business, and he was very little. I mean, we're talking, 5, 6, 7 years old. And his mom used to sew older clothes, and she ran out of thread and other things that you need. And so she sent them to the nearest town, walking in those days, to buy threads and things like that. So he ended up going to the store and bought it. But as a little kid, he says, let me go into town. And he said, let me get some ice cream or something. And then as he was walking by, he saw another store that sells, all these things that are about sewing. And then he saw the prices in the store. Again, he's a little tiny kid. And he's noticed that the prices were like 50 to 70% more. He didn't know the percentage. I mean, he says, wow, this is so much more expensive. So he had bought it like super cheap out of town, right? Yeah. So he went in the store and he says, my mother has this, but she cannot use it. Can I sell it to you? And they didn't have the colors. And all of a sudden, he bought the other ones for like 50 cents or whatever. I don't know, remember the amount. And then he sold it almost for double to that other store. and then with that money, he went to the ice cream shop and then he had money left over. But after he did that, he did that over and over again. And he started the whole process of reselling, which is something like very hot right now. It's like people buying here, people buying there. He did it like 50 years ago.
That's amazing.
And that sort of prompted me to say, okay, my dad did it. Like, what am I going to do? Get on with the program. And I remember we were living in Cuba at the time. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. And in Cuba in those days, there was no gum. You know the Wrigley's gums, the ones that were like that. So my aunts used to send us in the post office in the mail. You could fit like 3 or 4 of those in a letter.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no one in Cuba with that stuff. And then I went out to the neighborhood, and all the kids, I had 100 kids like staring at it. And I said, what an opportunity. And then what I would do is like, they're a little flat and long. So I would cut it like this thing, a little strip. And I gave to my 2 best friends, they got it for free. Okay. I mean, obviously. But the rest.
You charge for that?
They're for a little tiny piece. And the mint goes away very quickly. So I thought, I have a mint tree. I don't have. My parents have a mint tree in the back and it says, maybe I can put the little mint, because the kids would come back and says, this doesn't taste like mint anymore. I mean, they wanted to like a refund. and then I said, no refund for you, buddy. And then so I would take the little mint leaf and wrap this little tiny piece of gum And I says, you take this home and put it in a little bit of water in the fridge.
Wow.
And somehow it got like minty flavor again.
You were an innovator and an entrepreneur
so I was
too.
in the business of selling little gums and mint. That was the first
That's
time.
your first. So do you think entrepreneurs are born or they're exposed to an environment in your case?
Wow. That's really that. I think that is the question that philosophers have wondered their entire lives. You know, are you born or do you learn? I think it's a little bit of both. I think that a lot of it has to do with your parents, your environment, the opportunities that are there. But there's also this inner instinct, this inner child instinct that some kids seem to have it more pronounced than others. I mean, I don't think there's such a thing that every kid should be an entrepreneur, but every kid could if they really wanted to.
That's a really good point. So going back to your first business, how did your parents encourage that initiative?
Yeah, my parents were my biggest supporters, and I was this very awake child, so it was just a lot of energy. So that's sometimes challenging for parents. Like, how do they channel, all this energy and this kid going all over the place? And so they took a really strong stance on guiding. I really believe that kids are homemade, meaning that kids are really made by their parents early on. There's other parents that think, well, let them be creative, let them thought out. That usually never ends that good. But guidance and guidance. They encourage. I gave them the idea of my gum. The encouragement. They set up this little shop in the front of the house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And my dad, the best thing was watching my mom and my dad from the kitchen, watching me deal with the kids and taking money for little pieces of gum. They always encourage, always pay attention, but they always taught me probably one of the best lessons in the world, which is about money. Money, the people say money can be the source of all evil, but money can also be the source of all good. And they taught me so well that it's not about just making money for yourself. It's really making money for yourself and then making money for others. Because it's the art of giving. Like in my own little business, we took, they taught me how to take some of the proceeds and use it to help other people that were, a little bit, it was a full circle, you know what I'm saying?
So you learned that in your childhood,
earlier,
that concept.
You see it by watching your parents first. Yeah. There's a lot of parents that teach, but if they don't behave the way that they're teaching, the kid gets very confused because he says, my mommy and daddy are teaching me this, but I see them doing something else. That is a very confusing thing for a child. But the most of the problems people have in their marriage by themselves is money and how to manage it and the value of money. And I think to teach the kids the lesson is as important as teaching them how to be entrepreneurs or fend for themselves.
That is brilliant. And let's go back to that financial literacy component.
Yeah.
So how do you teach a child how to manage money?
It's simple and it has to be very practical. I remember not too long ago, my wife has a little school for little kids. And I remember me being involved in that project. And I was saying, this is a total experiment. I think one of the most amazing entrepreneurial things for a kid, especially nowadays, is growing food. Can you imagine? I know that we want to go to space and want to live in Mars and we want to build technology and robots. That's all great. But at the end of the day, people have to eat. And food is becoming more scarce and scarce. And a garden is money. So we took this experiment of taking a bunch of kids, growing, in other words, to your question, instead of like, oh, this is how money works, Fernando, instead of doing that, do practical things. They planted the seeds. They saw the plants grow. There were tomatoes. We grew tomatoes and basil.
Wow.
But there was an intention to this. So the tomatoes grow, the basils grow. Then you say, well, what do we do with this? We can eat it, great.
Mhm.
But then we said, you know what? How about taking it a step further? So we taught the kids how to make spaghetti sauce with the tomato
Wow.
and the basil. And then we taught them how to put it into jars and clean. And then after that, they started selling right in the school the tomato spaghetti to the people. And then they have money. And then they had a party coming up and they used that to have their party. So somehow they were able to connect. Is a whole value chain from producing to preparing to manufacturing to selling to doing something good for the money. They also went there was a home for older people. How do you call those homes? It's
Retirement
retirement
community?
homes, and they also gave some away
Yeah.
to. So you understand, it's not just saying this is how you do financial management and so on. It's really teaching them practical lessons that they see and they actually touch themselves.
That's amazing. And how you have extended your mission in life, which is how to teach other people to make successful businesses. You
Yes.
build billions of dollars around the
Yes.
world and created so many opportunities for so many people, including me.
Yes.
And we're all very grateful. All the
thank you.
the mentees that you've taken over the years. But this concept of profit and
Yeah.
creating profit for others
Yeah.
is such a powerful one.
It is.
Do you think a parent that is not entrepreneurial, right? That it has more like the employee mindset or working for somebody else, do you think they can still teach their kids these concepts?
Very, very much so, because it's actually a very simple concept of, you buy something for $1, you sell it for $3, you make a profit. Then what do you do with that profit? You invest it back into the business, you can eat, and you give away to people that need it the most. They are, if you look at my business card underneath, it says profit maker, because, there's wine maker, there's shoemaker. There's nothing more fun for me than studying the art and the science of what it takes to actually make money. And I think that starts really early. It's curiosity. And it's really turning ideas into money. But there is a process. There is a secret sauce. There is a way that you can get there quicker. Most people, if they want to, they will make money eventually. The question is, how do you cut the time? And how do you do it faster?
Well, you've created a proprietary framework to get there in a shortcut, but how would you
Yes.
simplify that to teach it to your child?
Wow. Well, I would choose, if I was, the parent, I'm the parent of a child, and I remember him starting his own little business when he was there. The way that you do, first of all, is to create an environment where your child believes that all ideas are good ideas. I cannot believe so many parents tell their children, I don't think that's a good idea, or that's a dumb idea, or I did that and it never worked. It just drives me nuts to hear all that negativity. And all ideas are good ideas because you've worked on it long enough and you're smart to get them done. They will be fruitful. So that, to me, that's the first premise, is to create that
Wow.
environment with a child, that all ideas, and then work with the child to see if there's a way that, or find a business or a craft. I remember one of Sebastian's business was to make greeting cards. I mean, how easy was that? And when you're a child, people think that anything you do is cute. So here he drew a bunch of things. We went with him to print it, and all of a sudden he was selling printing cards to his friends and to our relatives, right? That's how you start teaching them and saying, okay, I put the work. It was creative because it is creative. I still have some, actually, in my office, I have one of his greeting cards there.
Wow.
Just to remind me, right, that he did this on his own, and we helped and we enabled him, but we taught him the principles that hard work, ideas, patience makes money.
Wow. But this is passed from the previous generation. It started with your parents teaching you those concepts,
Yes.
and you passed it along to him.
And it started with their parents.
Wow. But how do you break a pattern from parenting pattern, right?
Well,
you have never been exposed to that.
no.
What advice you would give? Like, because now one of the critical future ready skills
that's a good point.
is entrepreneurship. I mean,
Yes.
people can no longer think like an employee anymore. Even employers, they
Right.
want entrepreneurial skills.
Yes.
Because you need to figure out some things on your own.
Yes.
So how do you break that pattern from a generation to the next one?
You know, that is, I mean, you're asking really hard questions today.
No,
But
you're the expert.
No, but this is actually a great question because not everybody has the background and loving parents and caring and concern. I realize that, you know, as a matter of fact, most people don't. And to be able to get there, I always think that learning happens when you want it to happen. And a lot of people that perhaps didn't have that background before, I'm sure that someone that surrounds them did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot. I mean, today, look, I said, you can learn from me. Google is like my best friend, you know, because everything is there. But also people, you can draw on how did you do it with your kids?
Yeah.
I've told this story many times. This is how we did it with my kids. This is how my parents did it with me. And it's really learning and understanding the process of entrepreneurship, which is basically creating. It's very simple. It's creating, packaging, branding, and sell it at a profit.
Oh my God, that's your framework. I love it. You have to do something for the kids now. I'm gonna challenge you. But one thing is that going back to that journey and on all the things that you've learned. My mother, for example, came from a family that she wasn't exposed to a lot of things. She didn't have she came from a dysfunctional family, and she wasn't exposed to those things. But I remember that she was very intentional with skills that she like had unconsciously.
Yeah.
But she was conscious that she didn't want to pass them to the next generation. For example, she was very fear of the dark. So one of the things that she did when I was little, she forced me to go like into like dark places in our yard.
Oh gosh.
So that I would never be afraid of that. So that's a start for a parent. You know, like if you're not entrepreneurial, maybe just challenge yourself, just not to critique, like you said, like just to like your preconceptions about what entrepreneurship or what didn't work for you. That might not, like, that's completely different for the next generation.
But it's actually very simple. I mean, if you're a parent, you have kids, you know, every time you go, I mean, people go to the supermarket and people go to the stores. Every time you go to the supermarket, take your kids and talk about the potato, the French fries. I mean, pick potatoes. You know, there's potatoes and then there is little bags of French fries. There's chips. Talk about how in the hell the potato got from the ground to here, and then somebody made it into a French fries. Other people made it into chips. Other make it, you know, made the potatoes for sugar, and understand the process right there. And also the kid says, "Oh, that's not just a stupid potato. You know, I can do something with a potato, and if you can do something with one potato, you can do anything."
Absolutely. No, this is amazing. So let's give parents some practical points on what they can do. You've shared so much wisdom today. So you mentioned encouraging curiosity and problem solving, exposing your kids, building the financial literacy too, and teaching kids the value of money, asking the questions, and also allowing them to have entrepreneurial experience. I mean, I personally love the Girl Scouts, the cookies. I gain like 10 pounds during the season, right? Every time, because I buy all the kids that sell me, I will buy them.
But that's a great model.
That's
a great model.
And that's a great program for kids. Like, absolutely. So also, and maybe, what do you think about letting them manage small budgets? So any other strategies?
Well, I mean, and that's a good one. Letting them manage budgets. Like, I remember to this day, the first time that I saw $1 that was given to me. By the way, I was like 8 years old by the time my mom actually gave me, because before I made money doing like little things here and there. This was a free $1, right? I remember it was like it was today. I said, "Oh my God, I have a whole $1." Well, she sat down with me and says, well, let's talk about how this dollar will be divided. And then and that was like a really intelligent conversation.
Yes.
It's like, 10% for here, 20% for that. This is where you do. Always leaving something for fun, right?
That is amazing. Well, today in Raising Innovators, we had the pleasure and the honor of hosting a very successful profit maker that is giving us some pointers on how to help your child become an entrepreneur and instilling those values and entrepreneurships and the value of giving back at an early age. It has been such a pleasure.
It's been fun. Thank you.
It's been lots of fun. And if this podcast is of value to you or your friend, please share, make comments, and we want to bring guests like Mr. John the Armas back to share their wisdom, because we're all joining together on a mission to raise the next generation of innovators. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching.